When I was 10 years old, my parents took me and my brother on a family vacation to Europe. We were halfway through our trip when we went to France, specifically Paris. The city of light and love, home of the Tour Eiffel and the Notre Dame Cathedral. The food was wonderful, the language elegant, and everyone dressed as if they were on their way to a fashion show. We weren't there long, but like many impressionable young girls before me, I was smitten. I left the city with my head in the clouds, vowing one day to return. And that was when the trouble began. Returning to Florida was a wake-up call. I lived in Daytona Beach, a place most of you see as an interim between high school and your future career. But I had been here since I was 4 years old. Paris had the Louvre, elaborate pastries, and Marie Antoinette, while Daytona, on the other hand, had Bike Week, fast food, and everyone's grandparents, not to mention the mosquitoes and the tourists. My snobby young soul longed for the opulence and sophistication that the French seemed to possess. True, I was only 10 years old, but I was determined to get myself back to the place I rightly belonged. Luckily, my heritage and childhood had already given me a push in the right direction. My father's side of the family hails from the western corner of Switzerland. My great-grandfather, Charles Auguste Vuille, immigrated to America shortly before the 20th century and established the family clan in Pennsylvania. Eventually, some of us drifted down to Florida, and voila, here I was. I learned some French at a young age from my father. As an eccentric professor, he believed that TV would rot my mind. Bereft of Barney and other television classics, I began reading at a very young age. My parents purchased children's French books for me, and with my father to read them, I began developing an ear for French. Most of these books were basic, run-of-the-mill stories, but one caught my eye in particular, Madeline. I loved Madeline. She and her friends went on spectacular adventures in late 1930s Paris, often accompanied by her dog Geneviève. She was kind and brave, especially in the face of adversity, and I lived vicariously through the books. Madeline, I decided early on, didn't know how good she had it. The years passed, and in 2000, I started high school. Tensions between the US and France were high. But while others discussed Freedom Prize and Jacques Chirac's treachery, I was taking AP French. In just a few short years, I'd be back in Paris, this time as a student studying abroad. In preparation, I read books about other lucky Americans who had lived la vie bohème. I watched French movies like Emily and About to Souffler. I became familiar with French history. And when Halloween rolled around, I dressed up as my favorite historical figure, the doomed French Queen Marie Antoinette. Summer 2006. My first year of college had flown by, and it was time for my triumphant return. The moment I stepped out of Charles de Gaulle Airport and onto French soil, I could not have been happier. Paris was exactly as I had remembered it, and beautiful in the summertime. When my fellow students and I weren't in class, we set about exploring the city and enjoying everything it had to offer. Best of all was the food. The city was covered with cafes and patisseries, and no matter what price you paid, the meals were delicious. The Louvre was my favorite place to go. The 14th century palace museum, made famous in the Da Vinci Code, was juxtaposed with a modern glass pyramid. Inside was the entrance to the museum. I went 4 or 5 times and didn't see a quarter of the artwork it held. As the summer went on, I grew more and more familiar with the layout in the city. I learned to navigate the metro system like a pro, and classes and time began to pass quickly. But at the end of the summer, my wallet was stolen in Italy. I was devastated. My credit cards and several $100s in cash disappeared, just like that. My friends tried to console me, but the experience was stressful, and I was suddenly homesick for Florida. I missed my family, and I missed my 2 dogs, and I missed watching the sunset over the Halifax River each night. In spite of my previous convictions, I realized that there are many things I loved about Daytona. I loved Paris, but I was ready to go back to Florida. Well, for a little while anyway.
Hold me close and hold me fast, the magic spell you cast, this is love your words. When you kiss me heaven sighs, and though I close my eyes, I see la vie en rose.